Did Jesus appear to any Romans or Pharisees after resurrecting that they would have also been an eyewitness? I've heard atheists claim that it's convenient that only followers saw him, so their testimony is suspicious.
Well, the answer to the question proper is no, that none that we know of. Okay, although the Romans that were guarding the tomb would have been witness to the resurrection. There's a reference to that, but they are not drawing from them as eyewitnesses, except for in a kind of a tangential way, because they were the ones apparently who went to the Jewish leadership, and said, "This guy's gone." Okay, well, and they said, "Well, tell everybody that the disciples stole them, and we'll cover for you," kind of thing. So there is an implicit reference to Roman soldiers who witnessed the event of the resurrection and came to the Jewish leaders to try to cover their tracks because their prisoner, though he was dead, got away, kind of thing. And that wasn't going to be good for them with the soldiers' superiors, okay? I do think it's a lame way of arguing that it's so convenient only the believers saw Jesus. There's nothing convenient about it. I don't know why that, because they're insiders and so they're going to lie. Okay, that's really what's behind this. You can't trust them because they were believers. Okay, the record shows that they were not inclined to believe in a resurrected Messiah. Okay, and the resurrection of the Son of God, or whatever the title of that book by N.T. Wright, this concludes with this very, very strong characterization. I mean, this is really a big part of what he is accomplishing in that massive book, is that they had no expectation of resurrection. So these people that the atheists, whose testimony the atheists are disparaging, are people who had no inclination to believe what they testified to in the first place. They did not expect their Messiah would be killed, much less resurrected. Even though Jesus said that to them, they didn't know what he was talking about. They were confused. That's what the record shows. Okay, so it is not very convenient for the record to cast the disciples in a negative light if they are the ones who are writing the story and are trying to falsify something. What, to make them look better? I don't know. And this is the other part. What is their motive to falsify a resurrection that didn't take place? And, I mean, because what that would mean is they're lying. So, okay, what is their motivation to lie? And they cannot, atheists cannot answer this because it's clear there's no motivation to lie. All right? If you want to know what the Holocaust was like, the best people to talk to are people who experienced it. Okay? And the Holocaust would be no less real or legitimately testified to if there were no Germans who testified about it. If it was only Holocaust survivors that testified about it, who would question their testimony? The people who actually experienced this. By the same token, why would you question the testimony of the disciples? They were the ones who experienced the risen Christ. Well, allegedly, it's convenient only believers. Wait a minute. They weren't believers before. How did they become believers? They became believers because they thought they saw Jesus.
Right.
And by the way, historians almost unanimously acknowledge they thought they saw Jesus. And they thought so to such a degree that they were willing to suffer martyrdom for the truthfulness of their testimony. Now, if they were lying, and I think I have this statement in the Story of Reality, but it's an easy one to kind of remember. There's a rule about lying. And kids know this, you only lie about something where the lie will get you something you want, something good. You don't tell a lie that's going to get you beaten, whipped, crucified upside down, or beheaded. Okay, that's not a good lie. And in fact, when you're facing that kind of consequence for the lie that you are telling, you're going to say, what was I thinking? Just joking. Please, not that. But these disciples sustained their testimony even in the midst of great persecution and even death. Okay? That's not a lie. All right? It may be that they're mistaken. I mean, that's certainly possible. But it's not they're mistaken and they know it. Okay? And you still have to account for the missing body. Where's the missing body? Produce the body, no problem. End of story. But the body was gone. All right? So these kinds of objections by atheists are just shallow. To be honest with you, skeptics like that are not skeptical enough. They should be skeptical of their own shallow objections, because that objection is extremely shallow. It's borderline silly. And that's not an ad hominem, that's a mere description about the nature of that kind of objection.
I mean, just look at Thomas. Thomas didn't believe until he saw. And the people who saw Jesus resurrected, they didn't believe until they saw. When they were gathered around together, they weren't saying, "Oh, I can't wait to see the resurrected Christ." They were shocked.
That's right. That's right.
Now, of course, the atheist is going to have problems with the whole account. So I don't know that any answer will satisfy them here. But I think your point, Greg, that they weren't seeing because they were believers. They were believers because they saw. I think that is the big point. And it's as foolish as saying, well, isn't it just convenient that those witnesses think John committed the crime just because, they were the only ones who saw him? Isn't that just convenient that they that they think that John? Well, it's because
you mean some John Doe, not John, the Gospel of John.
Right? No, right. I'm just saying, this isn't the way we
Fred.
think. This isn't.
There's no Fred in the Bible, so yeah, right. It's convenient that the people who saw the crime, are the witnesses regarding.
Only the people who saw the crime think he did it. Okay, well.
Yeah.
That's how eyewitness testimony works. And who is Greg?
Exactly.
I mean, who's Greg? Who is Jesus going to appear to? Of course he's appearing to his followers. Those are the ones that he prepared to explain what he was doing and why, and he had prepared them all ahead of time for this. That was the way he chose to do this. I don't see why that is a crazy thing for God to work.
But there are actually, Amy, there are two counterexamples, though. James, who is Jesus' half-brother, was not a believer until after the resurrection. He was a somewhat of a skeptic of that. And then you had Saul of Tarsus, who was in opposition to Christianity, and he was murdering Christians. And so he certainly had no inclination to believe in a resurrected Christ, but he turned on a dime based on what he took to be an experience of the resurrected Christ, and then became the greatest apostle, and himself beheaded just outside of Rome based on his testimony for Christ.
There are a lot of reasons to think that they weren't lying. I mean, of course, anyone can look up all these numbers of reasons, but how would you get all of these people to together make up this story and stick to it and go through all the things they went through? It is kind of irrational.